Senate Majority Leader John Thune, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. We have a lot to get to, but I do want to start with the breaking news we're following out of Texas. Multiple people were injured in a shooting at a Dallas ICE facility there this morning. The shooter is dead. There is a lot we do not know at this hour, including, most importantly, the motive. But are you worried about this as yet another instance of political violence?
I am. I think everybody ought to be, Dana. Obviously, this is the latest example, and you're right. We don't have all the details and all the facts, and we have to wait to get those to draw any conclusions. But clearly, another example of tragic loss of life, and that is something that, as we've observed lately in multiple circumstances, every American ought to be concerned about, and every American, no matter what your political views are, ought to be trying to prevent. And that's to keep our discourse civil and discuss these issues in a way that's respectful but doesn't resort to political violence.
All right, well, let's talk about some of these issues, including a very pressing one here in Washington. If the Senate does not pass a bill to fund the government in 6 days, the government will shut down. President Trump canceled a planned meeting with Democratic leaders, and CNN is reporting that he made that decision after speaking with you and House Speaker Mike Johnson. Did you encourage the president to cancel his meeting with Democrats?
Well, I think the president, I can't speak for the president. The president draws his own conclusions, but what I would suggest, and I think the president came to the conclusion that it wouldn't be a productive meeting. The Democrats' requests are completely unhinged and unreasonable and unserious. And if they want to have a serious conversation, I think that, I'm sure the president would be welcome or would be happy to do that. But at least right now, what they're asking for to keep the government open for 7 weeks is over $1 trillion in new spending and all kinds of policy riders that never go on continuing resolutions. Continuing resolution is something that when the Democrats had the majority and Joe Biden was in the White House, they passed 13 times, and Republicans worked with them to deliver the votes. Those are clean spending, continuing resolutions to fund the government for a foreseeable time in order to allow something else to happen. And in this case, we're trying to do this to allow the normal appropriations process to get underway so that we can pass bills the old-fashioned way, which is through the Appropriations Committee on the floor in the Senate, where every senator has an opportunity to make their voices heard. So this is a short-term extension of existing funding, current funding. The Democrats are trying to hijack it to get $1 trillion in new spending. And I don't think that's a very good deal for the American taxpayer. And it appears, at least at this point, the president's come to the same conclusion.
I want to get to one of the specifics in what the Democrats want in a second, but I understand the president is going to make his own decision. But I just want to confirm, you did urge the president not to have this meeting?
I spoke with the president, and I offer, as I often do, my opinions, but I generally don't share those publicly. And as I said before, the president comes to his own conclusions. He spoke, I think, with Speaker Johnson as well. We have at the desk in the Senate right now, Dana, a bill to fund the government, passed by the House, ready to be signed into law by the president. We could take it up today and pass it. It's that straightforward, and in the past, that's always the way this has worked. And in the past, as I said, 13 times when the Democrats had the majority in the Senate, this is the way that it was done, and Republicans worked with them on these short-term continuing resolutions.
Let's talk about one of the main Democratic demand that they want in exchange for keeping the government funded, which is to extend health care subsidies. There is support across the political spectrum for extending health care assistance. I'm putting some numbers up on the screen. 63% of Republicans, 80% of independents want that. Are you concerned about backlash for not saying yes to doing this as part of the short-term spending bill?
Well, I mean, a short-term spending bill, just that. It's a short-term spending bill to give us time to negotiate these bigger issues. We want to get appropriations bills done this year. That's not something they did when the Democrats had the majority. Senator Schumer didn't bring a single appropriations bill to the floor last year. We've done 3 of them already. We want to do a bunch more. And this enables us to have the time to do that and to have discussions about other issues, like the premium tax credit issue. There are obviously issues related to that, that particular program is desperately in need of reform, and I think that should be a part of the conversation as well. And I think everybody's willing to have that conversation, but you shouldn't hijack a bill that will keep the government open in order to do a lot of extraneous things. And this is a program that costs $365 billion. And so if we're going to have that conversation, we should, but it ought to be in a place and time where we can work through some of these issues and look at some of the reforms that would come with that to make that program work in a way that is a better deal for the American taxpayer.
A lot of them are going to expire at the end of the calendar year, though. So in the meantime, people could lose the help that they're getting in purchasing health insurance. Do you see any benefit in doing something before that happened? And even more broadly, are you sounds like you're committing maybe with some reforms to extending that as long as it's done through proper process?
Yeah, it ought to be done. It ought to be done in regular order, Dan. I mean, again, this is not the time or the place to do this. But bear in mind, it isn't just this the Democrats are asking for. They're asking for hundreds of billions of dollars of additional spending. They are literally wiping out the rural hospital fund that we put together, $50 billion that's available to help support rural hospitals. And that's wiped out in their proposal as well. So I think this is an issue that needs to be discussed. We need to figure out what the path forward is. Obviously, of the 23 million or so people that get their insurance on the exchange, over half of them this last year, according to a lot of the data that we've seen, didn't even file a claim and probably don't even know they have coverage because a lot of these folks get auto-enrolled. The payments are made directly to the insurance companies. Like I said, this is a program that needs reform, but I think everybody is willing to sit down and talk about how to make that happen in a context where it should be discussed, not as a hostage to keep the government open. I mean, right now, as I said, we got a bill sitting on the desk in the Senate that could keep the government open. Well, I mean, I think people aren't going to lose their benefits. Is that this expires at the end of the calendar year, and what we're talking about here is a 7-week continuing resolution to fund the government until November the 21st. And I assume in that time period there will be plenty of opportunities for us to negotiate and discuss what the future of the premium tax credit program looks like.
Would you commit to doing that as a way to keep the government open?
Well, I've said before, I'm happy to have the conversation. I mean, I got to see what's going to be proposed. I'm hoping that the Democrats actually have a proposal. What they're talking about is a straight-up extension, which, as I said, costs $365 billion, has no reforms in it. And this is a program that's desperately in need of reform.
Speaking of health care, I do want to ask about President Trump, along with HHS Secretary RFK Jr. saying this week that pregnant women should limit using Tylenol during pregnancy because of a, quote, very increased risk of autism. And that's a claim that is not grounded in science. How worried are you, sir, that RFK Jr. and the president will actually, with what they said, adversely impact the health of American women and their babies?
Well, I'm obviously very concerned about that. I am a father and a grandfather, and just have, as of about 7 months ago, a newborn grandson. So,
congratulations.
Obviously, thank you. Pregnant moms is something I have a very high level of interest in, and I agree. I think that science ought to guide these discussions, these conversations, and our decision making around our health. There are studies out there that they reference, but again, I think there are an awful lot of people in the medical community who come to a different conclusion about the use of Tylenol. And so I think that obviously my view is we ought to be very guarded in making broad assertions and make sure that they are well grounded in science and medicine, and where we're taking the consultation, advice of experts in the field, and ensuring that these things are all well documented.
So given the fact that it sounds like you do have some concerns about it, and RFK Jr. is in his job because you and the majority of the Senate voted to confirm him, is there anything that you can do to push back or call him, or is there anything you can do at all, or should you do in order to change the public discourse?
Right. Well, and the Senate Finance Committee had an oversight hearing recently where he testified, and I think he's scheduled to come before, or maybe the CDC director, Dr. Oz, is scheduled to come before HELP Committee, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee as well, to talk about some of these issues. But again, the Secretary has a responsibility and obligation to restore and return the trust of the American people in the decision-making process there. And I think the way to do that is to make sure that the decisions are grounded in science. But yes, there needs to be oversight, there needs to be accountability, and there needs to be transparency into this decision-making process, and ensure that it is governed by science. And we have a number of physicians, as you know, who are Republican senators who have pretty strong views about this, and I think have made those clear, not only in the last few days, but prior to that. As these decisions are made about America's public health, that ought to be grounded in science. And that's my belief, and I hope that the Secretary adheres to that. There will certainly be, I think, future opportunities for him and to come in and to defend his views and the decision-making process that leads him to the decisions that he makes.
Senator Jimmy Kimmel returned to the airwaves after an almost week-long suspension. I want to listen to part of his opening monologue.
Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC, telling an American company, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, and that these companies can find ways to change conduct and take action on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead, in addition to being a direct violation of the First Amendment, is not a particularly intelligent threat to make in public. Ted Cruz said he sounded like a mafioso. Although, I don't know, if you want to hear a mob boss make a threat like that, you have to hide a microphone in a deli and park outside in a van with a tape recorder all night long. This genius said it on a podcast.
Do you think that the FCC chair and the president went too far here?
Well, first off, Dan, I think, as you know, I am a big believer in the First Amendment and free speech. And I think that any decisions that are made with respect to programming ought to be made by the companies. Obviously, individual networks are making some of these decisions based on their criteria. In most cases, I assume that's going to be economic decisions based on ratings and revenue and that sort of thing. But yeah, coercive use of government shouldn't be something that is used. I think there were examples, obviously, in the previous administration where the Biden administration put pressure on social media platforms that are communicating news and information to the American people. So these, in any circumstance, the answer is these ought to be decisions left to the marketplace. Now, having said that, broadcast companies operate on public airwaves that are owned by the American people, which comes with a higher level of responsibility, obviously, and certain requirements that they have to live under when it comes to the agency that oversees that, which is the FCC. But as a general matter, my view is that, yeah, the government ought to stay out of the free speech marketplace unless there are clear violations that violate laws that are in place to protect the American people.
So the FCC chair and the president, they made a mistake here. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know if they made a mistake. They were making statements, but as somebody who serves on the Senate Commerce Committee, and referenced Senator Cruz, he's the chairman of the committee. He's made some observations about this. This isn't an area that I think the FCC ought to be wandering into.
And just to sort of follow up, the president put on his Truth Social platform, first of all, that the White House was told that Kimmel had been canceled, so he's not upset that he's back. And then he said, last time I went after them, they gave me, meaning ABC, $16 million. This sounds even more lucrative. A true bunch of losers let Jimmy Kimmel rot in his bad ratings. He's threatening to sue again. Is that the right approach?
I can't, again, I'm not going to speak for the president or the administration. He did win a big lawsuit. I think there is an expectation, again, when you operate on public airwaves, that there be certain standards of truth and facts that you operate around. And I think the reason there was a settlement there is because the courts found in the president's favor. Yeah. And if he wants to pursue litigation, obviously that's his prerogative. Yeah. But again, my view is when it comes to the FCC, when it comes to governing authorities and governmental power, it shouldn't be used in a coercive way when it comes to the First Amendment. I also think that people and companies that have people on their airwaves ought to pay a lot of attention to whether or not they are speaking truth and facts And there were some clear things that, in my view at least, in the statements that were made, as I said this before, they were incredibly inappropriate and questionable with regard to their accuracy. That's something also I think that the companies ought to pay attention to. But they're going to make the decisions based on criteria that they have. In most cases, those are going to be economic decisions.
Yeah, and of course, the court agreed with the settlement. They didn't, which was part of what ABC agreed to. They didn't say that ABC did anything wrong before they actually got to the settlement. I want to ask you a big picture question here, Mr. Leader, which is just to take a look at some of the actions that the Trump administration has taken in recent months. We've been talking about the threats to ABC for bringing back Jimmy Kimmel. A big one over the weekend was telling his attorney general to target political rivals by name. And then a part of that, he fired the U.S. attorney involved in looking into evidence on some of his political opponents because they didn't prosecute, fired the heads of several independent agencies, and of course, he's asking the Supreme Court to let him fire the Fed governor. He's doing all of this as you and fellow Republicans in Congress are largely silent. Should Americans take the silence as support?
Well, I think first off, there are a lot of things that are said, there's a lot of rhetoric, and then you got to see what happens and follow up with actions. I mean, I have every confidence that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, is going to make good decisions with respect to how she uses her prosecutorial powers. And I think we ought to have an independent Fed. I've said that. I've made that abundantly clear. I think we need an independent central bank. But, you know, there are a lot of things that are said, but I think you have to see actually in the end what gets done, Dana. And yes, we have a responsibility as an independent, co-equal branch of the government to make sure that we're doing appropriate oversight of these decisions. And I believe that we will do that. We have a number of committees that have oversight. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, you asked me about HHS earlier. There was a very rather, I would say, argumentative, explosive hearing a few weeks ago in front of the Senate Finance Committee on some of on the subjects that you just mentioned. And I expect that will continue. There have been a lot of things, as I said, that presidents say. I've been around several administrations, several presidents. Every one of them tries to assert as much executive power as they possibly can. And sometimes that gets tested in the courts, and obviously sometimes there's oversight that happens through the Congress, through the power of the purse, and other powers that the Article I branch of the government possesses.
Before I let you go, we're out of time, but your colleague Lindsey Graham was on Fox last night and once again suggested that there should be a third Trump term. I know that he has a sense of humor. Maybe he was joking, but he's not alone in saying this. Can you say definitively, as the Senate Majority Leader, you do not believe constitutionally that President Trump or any president could have a third term?
Well, I think the Constitution speaks to that issue, and I think it's pretty plain, Dana.
Okay, so no Trump 2028.
Well, I didn't see. I know Lindsey said that before, and I think he generally expects a pretty lighthearted response when he says it.
Okay. All right. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dana.